working wirelessly tonight, and I know that that's going to bog down the system when I'm home. It doesn't bother me so much because I'm hardwired, but I'm actually wireless tonight. So bear with me. If you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. And if you really got to ask a question out loud because it's just too complicated to ask on the chat box, then just let me know in the chat box and I will activate your microphone. I don't have a problem doing that. Sometimes I know questions can be rather complicated. So I'm hoping you're all doing well tonight. It's really been fun as all of you have gotten more and more involved in the discussion forums and are starting to challenge each other a bit and think a little differently, or maybe you have a different perspective on something. It's great dialogue. I'm trying to get down. Did I pass it? No. Okay, signature assignment options. And this is what we're going to look at tonight. And then when I'm done going through it, you're more than welcome to jump off and go ahead and enjoy your evening. Or if you have additional questions, you can stay on. You have two options for your signature assignment. We use the same rubric in TaskStream. And so the rubric is very broad, it's very global. But the first option is to write an educational policy paper. And the focus of the paper is to provide recommendations to policymakers to make changes. It's not a historical analysis of a policy. So let's say you want to do Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. You might give a little bit of background that, the law was passed in 1975. It has been amended several times. It serves populations ages 3 to 21, and give just a brief summary of the law. But the paper is not a historical analysis of the law itself. Rather, it should just provide some historical background and information. It's also not an opinion paper, whether or not, so I'm not asking you to tell me I like it, I don't like it, or I just don't find that it's very useful, or it should have been crafted differently. It's not an opinion paper. Rather, it's you looking at IDEA and stating, based on what we've learned and the materials we've covered, is to provide makers in DC, if you got the opportunity to talk to the Director of Special Ed for the federal government, and say, hey, these are some changes that should take place, and here is why. So you're going to support those changes from our readings and the materials that we have covered. And you are more than welcome to pull in other resources or research or best practices that have been researched and indicate that this is why the policies, aspects of the policy should change. And make sure that you're pulling in the context, political economy information, the ideologies, all from the analytical framework. So as you have been working on those ideologies during the course, those are your notes. That's how you're going to write your paper. And so use those as notes. We didn't have you create those just because. They actually support your signature assignment. Again, it's not your opinion. These are policies that you feel should change based on values, based on best practices, in order to more effectively serve populations. So make sure you cover all constructs of the analytical framework, the impact on a city, town, or village. We all in the Valley live in either a town or village because we don't have cities like LA or San Francisco or San Diego. Identify the population you live in as a city, town, or village, and then discuss it from that perspective. Utilize the concepts taught under FPU's IDEA and Delbert's work to reflect upon your setting. So go all the way back to the beginning of the course and pull out that information on the FPU IDEA about serving communities. Clearly identify your concerns and clearly discuss and provide a solution. Pull from a variety of resources within the material, including our textbooks as well as outside resources, and draw upon global perspectives or experiences This means get into those countries that we've looked at already. How would those countries do something different, or what could we have learned from them in creating that policy that should have been considered? Then the four policies that may be done are the Every Student Succeeds Act, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, or the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA. Now, if you have a policy that's just burning in you that you really want to do, feel free to email me. I just ask that you allow me to provide some direction and let you know whether or not that the policy you're thinking of is substantial enough to write your signature assignment. So I am open to other ideas. You just need to shoot me an email that is detailed as to the policy you want to cover. Granted, if it's a national policy that I'm well acquainted with, not so much detail is needed. However, if you're wanting to do a policy within your school district, then I need you to provide me with a great deal of information, since I do not know all of your districts. Any questions on the educational policy paper? Okay, so your second option is a personal philosophy paper. And students like this paper because they get to use personal pronouns, and they get to talk about I and how I feel and I believe, and we know what I've experienced. So this is a personal reflection on yourself as to what you've learned during the course as to your own values and what you will do with those values now that you've identified them to move forward. Just like at the very top of our Moodle page, not the graphic, the image that is there indicates that once you know what your values are, it's very easy to make decisions moving forward. So in this section, what do humans aspire to? It could be happiness, it could be discipline, it could be academics. How do they go about achieving their goals, following those passions like Rousseau did, disciplining themselves as in Locke and Kant, finding their role in society, or living a balanced life? So what are the aspirations of human beings? And then fully develop this section with rationale, examples, and arguments, including information from the philosophers we've studied that you agree with as examples, and describe why you don't agree with others. So just as when you work on your thesis, you always want to provide a perspective of those that demonstrate best practices on what you want to cover in your study. A good researcher also knows the opposite side. My parents raised me and my siblings to always educate ourselves on both perspectives of issues, so that when we made a decision, we were always well informed. So don't just look for the philosophers that seem to agree with the values you embrace. Find those philosophers that don't, and be able to discuss both sides of the coin. The challenge, though, is to discuss the tendency to act contrary to your own best interests and the interests of others. So from a Christian perspective, you could say, what is it that makes me sin or not uphold my values at a given point in time? So what are those tendencies that push you the wrong way? A real simple, basic one would be something like having had a very challenging week and you're just exhausted, and you're tired and you just don't want to deal with something, and you just say, forget it. Exhaustion, overworked, can influence how we make decisions and whether or not we uphold our values. And then, excuse me, where does this tendency or impulse come from, and how is it best dealt with? And deal with inner conflicts, societal constraints, social injustices. So that's the meaty part towards the beginning of your submission. Then look at the role of education, the view on learning. How do students best learn? What role does education play in helping humans achieve their goals and outcomes? What is the limit of education? What can't education do for students? What should be the focus of education? What should the curriculum be? College career preparation, character development, nurture spirit and soul, Common Core, all of those discussion board items that we've discussed so far in class. So what is the role of education in your perspective based upon your values? And then in conclusion, in your personal paper is what will I do to further the role that education plays in the development of children into vibrant, contributing citizens. So what are you going to do differently, or how are you going to do something better? Because now you really have a clear idea of what your values are as an educator. Make 3 to 5 specific statements that will either be affirmation of current practices in your own life or new commitments. Excuse me. State them as I will. So your value statement, and then elaborate a bit on them. Include any affirmations, maxims, quotations you will use to guide your teaching career. And include a plan on how you will implement these findings and changes. Now, this plan might be something in a table or an Excel sheet. It doesn't have to be, but kind of a timeline, just like we have a lesson plan of breaking things down into steps to move yourself forward. So whereas the personal philosophy paper is very reflective of yourself, what you've learned during our time together, how you will do things better or differently, and it talks about your soul. The policy paper reflects on practices within education across the country. Any questions on the personal philosophy paper? Okay. So with the rubric, as I said, it's very global. Just as a reminder, meets criterion, just like with our rubrics in the class. This is considered appropriate graduate work, and if you want to put a grade on it, this would be B grade. It's when you exceed criterion in graduate work where the A's appear. So if you're wanting that A, you need to focus on that far right-hand column. So it covers the aims of education on both papers, the view of learning, the view of learner, understanding the context in city, village, town, as well as the global piece. And then 10% of your grade is still APA, grammar, punctuation, graduate writing, scholarly tone. So even if you nail the content, if your APA, your tone, mechanics, grammar, punctuation are off, it could drop your grade, a full grade on your paper. So keep that in mind. Let me emphasize that as you're writing, make sure that you're addressing the aims of education, you're addressing the view of learning, and that you're addressing the view of the learner. That should have a "the" in there, so that you are then tying the paper together into that analytical framework that we've been using during our time together, as well as the context of town, city, village, and global perspectives on education. Let me also emphasize the need that your paper should be interconnected. Every piece, none of the content should stand out by itself. It somehow is connecting to your values, to the city, to the town, to that perspective. So make sure that your paper is interwoven. Hope that makes sense. It's the biggest concern I have when I get the signature assignment is the papers aren't synthesized. They aren't tied together neatly. Students will provide some kind of abstract thought or just a thought that doesn't seem to connect to their values or to the discussion at hand. Any questions? Seven to 10 pages total of text. So that does not include your title page, that does not include your reference page, but it would include your timeline or Excel sheet, yes. No, Joe, you're more than welcome to submit anytime you want to. I just don't grade, and I basically grade every Monday or Tuesday. So if you submit something now, you may not hear back from me until that week rolls around. But in addition, the signature assignments, I do not grade until the term has concluded. So the signature assignments will be graded between August 12th and August 15th because I have to turn grades into the registrar's office on August 15th. So that's when signature assignments would be graded. But again, you're more than welcome, Doe, to turn things in anytime. What is the due? Okay, Caitlin, I think you're asking me, the signature assignment or all assignments are due absolutely no later than Friday the 11th at 11:59 p.m. That's the last day of the term, and university policy states I cannot accept any papers after that time and date. And so you just need to have things in by then. Anything else from anybody on the signature assignment? If you're good with that, feel free to go ahead and hop off. If anybody has any questions about anything else, I'm more than happy to answer them. Otherwise, I will stay in touch as I have been, and have a wonderful evening. You're welcome, Patricia, and I got your email, and I'll get back to you on that. You're welcome, Caitlin. You're welcome, Patricia.